everyone! Today we are going to be talking about court interpreting. What is a court interpreter? Court interpreters are individuals who provide an essential public service, giving direct assistance to parties in interest who are limited English proficient or deaf or hard of hearing. The need for qualified interpreters is growing. The demands are great, but so are the rewards. It is the goal of the Administrative Office of the Courts to provide certified, skilled, and professional interpreters in the North Carolina court system. Being bilingual is not enough, and it does not ensure equal access to court proceedings and court operations. What is the role of a court interpreter? The court interpreter's duty is to serve as a conduit between non-English speakers and English-speaking officials in legal forums. As they convert one language to another, interpreters play a critical role in the administration of justice and make it possible to ensure the rights of due process and participation in the court system of all those involved. The main goal of the court interpreter is to enable the judge and the jury to interact with the LEP person like they would interact with English-speaking people. I felt that the article said it best when they said that the court interpreter should aim to produce a legal equivalent, a linguistically true and legally appropriate interpretation. So now, who qualifies as a court interpreter? It can be difficult for officials to know if interpreters are qualified to interpret for an LEP person. Court interpreters who are authorized to provide interpreting services, who are listed on North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts Registry, specifically of Spanish language court interpreters, are qualified. The AOC, through state certification, is better able to ensure the quality and professionalism of interpreters in courts across the state. The Office of Language Access Services recommends a level A1 or A2 be scheduled and used whenever possible. These are the two highest levels, particularly for superior court or district court trials. Equal access to justice requires meaningful language access, which only certified, that is the key word, certified court interpreters have demonstrated an ability to provide. Alright, so how do you become a North Carolina court interpreter? There are 5 steps. The first step, attend the North Carolina Court Interpreter Orientation Training Session and pass the written screening test. A person must fill out a registration application, attend an orientation session, and pay a fee for the course and the written tests. Secondly, they must submit a completed application to be a registered court interpreter, and along with that, a criminal check will be done. And third, this is a requirement specifically for Spanish candidates. They must attend a skill building workshop approved by NCAOC in order to be eligible to sit at the oral North Carolina Court Interpreter Certification Examination, or NCCICE. On to the 4th and 5th steps. So fourthly, North Carolina Court Interpreter Certification Examination is another requirement. Normally these tests are scheduled in October, but occasionally in the spring. There is a fee. You must pass a criminal background check again. You need to submit 4 recommendation letters, and each of the 3 sections of the NCCICE must be passed with a score of 70% or higher. And final approval lies with the NCAOC. And lastly, there will be a contract with NCAOC Spanish candidates, and there are 3 levels here. We have level A1 Master Certified, level A2 Certified, and Level B conditionally qualified court interpreter for the Spanish language. If you have the required scores and your application is approved by the manager of OLAS, it will then be sent to the NCAOC requesting a contract be extended to you. Once the paperwork is done, your name will be on the NCAOC registry of spoken foreign language court interpreters, which is available online to all language access coordinators, attorneys, and agencies to access your services if an interpreter for Spanish is ever needed in a court. So, a court interpreter is what? So we've spoken on this topic a little bit, but a court interpreter is impartial, sworn in, and involved in many other stages of the legal process. So, a court interpreter is impartial. Contrary to the belief of some individuals, two interpreters are not necessary for opposing sides. If there is ever a potential conflict, the court interpreter must let the court know before beginning, or the judge or another official may ask if there is any issue with the interpreter interpreting for this particular client. Otherwise, interpreters are interchangeable during a court proceeding. So, interpreters are also sworn in. They are sworn and bound by ethics to be neutral, unbiased language conduits that interpret accurately and completely. One thing that the court should avoid is acting as an interpreter itself. That's why there are court interpreters. They must refrain from allowing an attorney, a judge, an officer to function as an interpreter. A judge or attorney will not be able to perform their duties to the full extent if they are functioning as an interpreter, and there may be a conflict of interest if the judge is acting as a fact finder and interpreter, and if the attorney is acting as an advocate and an interpreter. Alright, so we talked about how officials do need court interpreters to be involved in more than one stage of the legal process. So authorities may contact interpreters for help when they are doing interviews following an arrest, or when they are having specific meetings with the clients. So on to the next. There are 3 modes of court interpreting, and you might recognize these 3. So the first is simultaneous interpreting. It's explaining things in real time while people are speaking. It is used for jury instructions, arraignments, or motions, and it is commonly used when speaking is done between lawyers and judges, and the LEP person needs to be listening rather than talking. Consecutive interpreting is used when the LEP person is in the witness stand or during client-attorney interviews. Because this requires the court interpreter to deliver information in chunks, this can make the process of interviews a lot longer, so breaks may be requested by the interpreter. Lastly, we have virtual remote interpreting. It relies on technology to permit effective communication in court. The interpreter provides services by phone or video conference with the use of technology. The interpreter is also able to see the whole courtroom. He can control audio in consecutive, simultaneous, and private mode. These are great tools, especially in states that do not have those qualified and skilled interpreters immediately available to them. So, why and when is a court interpreter needed? The North Carolina Judicial Branch is committed to removing barriers that prohibit equal access to justice by individuals with limited English proficiency. The use of an untrained and untested bilingual person trying to function as an interpreter creates a real risk of misinterpretations of testimonies, which may result in missing or added facts relevant to the case. The court requires an interpreter for any court proceeding involving an individual who speaks a language other than English, but that does not mean that they can use just anybody. The same should be considered when a DA or district attorney meets with an LEP person outside of court. People's lives depend on the quality of services courts bring, so their interpreters should be highly specialized and skilled. What will a court interpreter do for the client? Before the proceeding begins, the court interpreter will need to hear the client speak in their native language and explain his role. This will allow the interpreter to listen to any impediments in the speech that the client might have. It will allow them to be familiar with their manner of speaking, their speech style. Secondly, during the court proceeding, the court interpreter will help the client communicate with their lawyer, court personnel, and the judge. The interpreter will interpret everything without adding, omitting, or changing any of the information given. The court interpreter will interpret anything the client says into English and will interpret everything said into the client's native language, and specifically for us. So he will also maintain confidentiality of any information disclosed to him outside of the court proceeding. Alright, what will the court interpreter not do for the client? The court interpreter will not give the client legal or any other kind of advice. He will not talk to the client about their case, he will not answer any questions, and he will not help them fill out any kinds of forms. The court interpreter's main job is to communicate what everyone is saying in the courtroom. It is not his job to explain to the client what is going on or what words mean. If anything, the court interpreter needs to promote communication between the client and his attorney. Most importantly, the court interpreter will not have private conversations between the client and their family. This can only be done if an attorney is present. Alright, access to an interpreter outside of the courtroom. Outside of the courtroom, the judicial branch offers telephone interpreting services to help LEP individuals communicate with court officials. So there are two different kinds. We have telephone interpreting service. This service is available to provide immediate access to foreign language interpreters. Then we have live interpreters, so in-person interpreters. District attorneys' offices must contact a court interpreter from the registry of Spanish language court interpreters. So it cannot be just anybody. It has to be from that registry. Next we have pre-hearing considerations. As a general rule, a team of 2 interpreters should be secured for any proceeding likely to last for more than 2 hours. With the commitment to remove language barriers, something else to keep in mind is that if a proceeding is to last more than 2 hours, you will need 2 interpreters. Interpreting for too many hours can cause fatigue, can cause a loss of concentration, and could lead to miscommunications and errors from the interpreter. Court interpreters should review relevant documents well before the proceeding, including those that he might be expected to translate. By reviewing documents prior to the court proceeding, it will allow the interpreter to identify and study any new terminology that may come up and may be used during the court proceeding. So next we have translation and transcription services. In order to make sure a quality and accurate translation is done, only certified court interpreters, or ATA, meaning American Translator Association, translators will be assigned by OLAs to perform translation work. Due to the level of skill it takes to transcribe or translate sound of video recordings, OLAs only assign such projects to federally certified court interpreters. Documents should not be translated by untrained bilingual people. Transcribing and translating sound or video recordings is an incredible challenge that only certified translators should take on. Alright, and here we have skill building workshops and continuing education resources, such as American Pie seminars, Castillo language services, Delamora Institute of Interpretation, Southern California School of Interpretation, and many, many more. And finally, I have a meanings of acronyms page because I know that I had some of those sprinkled out through my presentation. And finally, my works cited page. Alright, thank you so much guys for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of the semester.